Germany has long been the country others pointed to when they wanted an example of stability. A nation with precision engineering, efficient institutions, and a famously high standard of living. For decades, Germany didn't just run well, it set the standard for how modern societies could function. But something has shifted. In 2025, Germany finds itself confronting one issue more intensely than almost anything else: irregular immigration. And for the first time in years, German leaders are openly saying the system has reached its limit. So how did Europe's economic powerhouse end up here? And why has immigration, once seen as a backbone of German prosperity, become its most divisive issue? Germany's modern identity is impossible to understand without immigration. After World War II, entire industries were empty. West Germany turned to so-called guest workers, first from southern Europe, then from Turkey. Many planned to stay a few years. Instead, they became part of Germany's long-term story, building factories, opening businesses, and reshaping its culture. By the 2000s, Germany had become one of the most attractive destinations for newcomers, especially as its economy zoomed. Even critics admit one thing: Germany would not be the country it is today without foreign labor. But this long-standing openness was about to be tested like never before. The 2015 to 2016 refugee crisis was a humanitarian emergency on a scale Europe hadn't faced in generations. Germany made a defining decision. It allowed in more people than any other EU state. Train stations filled with volunteers, crowds cheered. There were worldwide headlines praising Germany's compassion. But behind the scenes, something else was happening. Municipalities were overwhelmed, housing shortages exploded, schools and local services struggled to keep up. As the years passed, support for the open-door approach began to fracture. Fast forward to the early 2020s. Global instability, economic strain, and new migration routes created a second wave of arrivals, this time without the public unity Germany had in 2015. Border authorities reported record numbers of irregular crossings, many involving individuals with no identification documents. Processing centers filled, cities warned of housing shortages, overcrowded shelters, and rising costs. But what truly shifted public opinion was a growing perception of insecurity, fueled by both isolated incidents and broader statistical patterns. Surveys revealed more Germans felt unsafe in public spaces than at any point in the last decade. Confidence in the government's ability to manage migration collapsed. Crime statistics became a central point of national debate. It is crucial to emphasize, most refugees do not commit crimes. However, a small but highly visible fraction of young, single men living in overcrowded shelters became disproportionately involved in certain types of offenses. And these offenses were the ones ordinary Germans felt most directly. Group assaults in nightlife districts, knife attacks at train stations, harassment incidents at festivals and Christmas markets, street violence linked to territorial disputes inside shelters, theft and intimidation around transit hubs, increased police interventions in overcrowded migrant housing. Police unions warned that many shelters had effectively become parallel zones where cramped living conditions, idleness, trauma, and lack of supervision created constant conflict. An internal police report leaked in 2023 revealed that officers were being dispatched to the same shelters multiple times a night, responding to fights, domestic violence, knife threats, and sexual harassment cases. Some officers described these facilities as flashpoints, not because residents wanted trouble, but because the environment itself was combustible. The public felt the consequences in everyday life. Transit station incidents rose sharply. Platforms, underpasses, and bus terminals became hotspots for intimidation, harassment, and occasional stabbings. Women reported feeling increasingly unsafe in nightlife areas and festivals after several high-profile harassment and assault cases involving groups of recently arrived young men. Organized street robberies in cities like Berlin, Cologne, and Hamburg often involved small groups operating in nightlife districts. Police noted spikes in knife-related offenses, which were sometimes linked to cultural norms about self-defense in countries of origin. School altercations increased in districts where refugee shelters were placed next to already overstretched schools. Again, these problems were not caused by migrants as a whole. The vast majority were law-abiding, but the high concentration of frustrated, unemployed, unsupervised young men inside shelters produced a statistical pattern that became impossible for the public to ignore. Even local authorities, traditionally cautious about discussing crime and migration together, began sounding the alarm. Social workers reported that many arrivals had experienced war, trauma, or long periods living without structure. Without language skills, stable housing, or routines, they spent months isolated in shelters with little to do. Some turned to alcohol, drugs, or aggression. Others were recruited by petty criminal networks. The problem wasn't immigration. The problem was a system that brought people in faster than it could integrate them. And once the public connected these issues, shelter violence, street harassment, knife crimes, transit attacks, with failures at the border, the national conversation changed completely. For many Germans, this was no longer about politics or humanitarian ideals. It was about personal safety. By 2024, polls showed nearly half the country believed crime had risen significantly because of uncontrolled migration. Whether the statistics fully supported this or not, the belief itself became a political force strong enough to reshape policy. Germany, a nation built on stability and predictability, now felt to many like a place where the basic rules were slipping. And that perception, fair or not, transformed the entire debate. Germany is not acting alone. Across the continent, similar policies are rising. Austria tightened controls. Hungary fortified its borders years ago. Italy and Greece pushed the EU to rework asylum rules. France is debating its own sweeping changes. When Germany, the EU's largest economy, changes direction, it sends shockwaves throughout the bloc. Some see Germany's new stance as a necessary correction. Others fear it marks the end of Europe's humanitarian ideals. Either way, it is reshaping European politics in real time. Germany now faces a difficult balancing act. Can it reduce irregular migration without damaging its global image? Can it safeguard security while staying committed to human rights laws? Can it fill its labor shortages even as border controls tighten? And perhaps the most important question, does this shift represent a temporary emergency measure or the beginning of a long-term transformation in Europe's immigration philosophy? Germany's choices in the coming years won't just define its own future, they may shape the entire continent. As Germany stands at this crossroads, the world watches closely. The choices made today, at the borders, in parliament, and inside crowded shelters, will echo far beyond 2025. They will shape how Europe defines compassion, responsibility, and security in an era where all three are in constant conflict. Some believe Germany's new course is overdue. Others fear it signals a retreat from values that once inspired the world. But no matter where you stand, one thing is undeniable. Germany's immigration crisis is no longer just a story about migration. It's a story about identity, about safety, about the limits of modern systems, and about a nation trying to reconcile who it was, who it is, and who it wants to be next. The debates aren't over, the tensions aren't resolved, and the future is far from certain. But one chapter has ended, and a new one is just beginning. If you found this breakdown useful, make sure to like the video, subscribe, and leave a comment. It helps the channel grow, and it lets me know you want more deep dives like this one.